And welcome back to the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Remember that subscribe button if you haven't already. We appreciate all of you who joined our community in the past few days. With that said, trying to reach 300 by the end of the week. Let's see if we can make it happen. Now, as far as the video here today, we're going to go over the AL West anyway. We discussed already the AL East and AL Central. So a number of different things that have happened already this offseason since the lockout ended. So let's start with the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. First and foremost, the Shohei Ohtani show is pretty much what they have going for them. Of course, Mike Trout is still there, but he had some injuries last year. We'll see if he can get back to being the old Mike Trout. I have no doubt that he will. Rendon, of course, had a down year last year with the Angels. Does he improve? The offense really has never been an issue for the LA Angels. The issue has always been the starting staff, pitching staff, that kind of thing. They have invested in it for once this year. They did bring in Thor, Noah Syndergaard from the Mets. He is also coming off of injury. Tommy John and that kind of thing. Ohtani was probably the best player in all of baseball last year. Both sides of both the pitching side and the hitting side. Michael Lorenzen was brought in. They have a number of young starters that they could turn to as well. They did bring in a closer in Raisel Iglesias as well. Justin Upton is still there. You still have Joe Adell, Brandon Marsh, those kinds of things at the corners. So their lineup is very well set. The bullpen is going to be a concern for me, as well as the back end of that starting staff. Does Ohtani hold up for 162 games, both as a hitter and a pitcher? Did they limit him more as a pitcher this year? Do they limit him more as a hitter this year? Remains to be seen. But with the DH now being in both leagues, it was already in the American League. Maybe they give him a little bit less opportunities to affect one side of the ball or the other. We shall see what ends up happening there. Thor, will he stay healthy is the biggest question for me. If he can stay healthy, both him and Ohtani at the top of a pitching staff would give any team pause in the postseason. The question is, can they get to the postseason? They haven't been to the postseason in a very long time. Will they finally be able to turn it around? Mike Trout has been yearning to be in the playoffs for a number of years. Has only been to the wild card round in the past. Is this the year they finally push the envelope and get it done? Remains to be seen. Let us know in the comment section what you think of the Angels as a playoff contender this year. Me, I don't see it, but maybe with the addition of Noah Syndergaard, if healthy, maybe they can push for a wild card spot. There is an extra spot in each league this year for an extra wild card team. We'll see if either one of them can get it done. Second, we want to go over the Houston Astros. The Houston Astros have been the most successful team in the division for the past 6 or 7 years. They did win a World Series. They do lose a couple of starters as well. Zach Greinke is no longer there. McCullers is not there to start the year. They lost Keuchel a couple of years ago. They lose Carlos Correa as their starting shortstop. Jeremy Pena looks to take over that spot. So there is a lot of losses coming here, but they do have a lot of young starting pitching that was able to prove themselves a little bit in the playoffs. With another year of experience under their belt, maybe that starting staff continues to improve. Yuli Gurriel is there as kind of the older veteran there. Yordan Alvarez has probably been there enough time now to where you could consider him a veteran, even though he's still very young. Bregman, also a very young player. Maybe they end up moving him over to short if Pena doesn't work out. Bregman does need to return to form, though. Had a little bit of a down year last year. He needs to return to MVP level performance anyway if the Astros are going to remain at the top of the American League, not just the AL West. Jose Altuve is probably the best position player that they've had for the past decade. Even when in the years where they were terrible, he was still hitting for over 300, 330 anyway. That's one heck of a high batting average. Short guy, but of course he packs a punch. Famously hit that home run in the World Series where they took the jersey off and all that. Check me, and all that. Whether or not you believe they were cheating or not, the Houston Astros have been a very successful franchise for the past 6-7 years. The only thing I have pause about is the loss of Carlos Correa and the losses on that pitching staff. Sure, they've supplanted it with some young starters that they have. They have Framber Valdez, Luis Garcia, Jose Urquidy, Christian Javier. They do have a veteran in Jake Odorizzi there as well. But this team needs another starter, I believe, by the deadline. We'll see if they go out and get one. They weren't willing to spend some money in order to keep Carlos Correa, which does worry me about where this franchise could be headed in the next 3-4 years. Other teams in the division are up and coming. The Angels are looking to push for a playoff spot. They have a lot of good young position players. But again, the Angels have always had good position players. We'll see if their pitching finally comes along. But for the Astros, now their lineup starts to lose pieces. They no longer have George Springer in center. They no longer have Carlos Correa at shortstop. The pieces that won them the World Series are not there anymore. They still have Altuve, Brantley, Bregman, and Alvarez, but those pieces are starting to chip away. Will another piece come off of that board with Brantley if he retires or goes to a different team next season? In another 2 years, will Bregman be gone? In another 3 years, will Gurriel be gone? Tucker seems to be performing at a very high clip. He struggled in his first taste of major league action, but over the last 2 years, he's basically been Michael Brantley younger. He's been very good, very productive hitter. He's done nothing but succeed since his rookie year. Uh, Defensive players they now have filling the spots of Springer and Correa. Chas McCormick is taking over in center field. Jeremy Pena at shortstop. Maldonado is still behind the plate, so you're starting to see some offensive deficiencies at those spots. We'll see if they can have enough offense out of the pieces they still have left. I believe there is, and I still believe they're the class of the division. Will they win the division? You have to stick around and find out. They did bring back Justin Verlander. He is coming off of injury. So again, more pitching staff issues. Ryan Presley figures to be the closer this year. They do have a little bit of some young players there that they could call up over the next year or so. Aledmus Diaz is there as well. Nico Goodrum, they brought him in from Detroit. Maybe he takes some time at shortstop as well. They're trying to piecemeal this thing together instead of go all out and keep Carlos Correa. We'll see if it's enough, if they still keep enough of what they had originally in order to keep their success going. Let us know in the comment section what you think of the losses they've endured over the last few years, and if you think they're ripe for more losses in the next couple of years. Let us know if you think they're still the class of the AL West, or if you think maybe another team caught them. The Angels, the Mariners, the A's did take more than a few steps back this offseason, or maybe the Rangers, who did sign Seager and Semien. Next team is going to be the Oakland A's. The Athletics did send out a whole bunch of talent this offseason. Mark Canha and Starling Marte both signed with the New York Mets. Outfielders are now gone. They still have Laureano, but he's been rumored to be traded as well. He is still under a suspension, but he was also being rumored about being traded under that suspension. That tells you how quickly this team is trying to shed payroll. They did trade a couple of other players as well. Matt Chapman goes to the Toronto Blue Jays for a package of prospects. Matt Olson brought back the biggest package, the 1 and 2 prospects from the Braves, along with the 6 and 14. Shea Langeliers probably figures in as the future catcher for the Oakland A's. They still have a very good catcher right now in Sean Murphy, but I don't expect him to be there after the next year. Maybe they keep him for one more year. But if you're an Oakland A's fan, it's the same old story. They trade their young talent as soon as they start to make money and start over again. This cycle is not going to stop until they finally get a stadium built, and they're going to have some financial success on the back end in order for them to send money back out. Now, you still have Elvis Andrus as kind of a veteran there. That money is sunk. They tried to offload some money as well last year in the Chris Davis deal for Elvis Andrus, and now they're stuck with his deal this year, kind of living the downside of that. Billy McKinney, they did sign this offseason as well. He probably pencils in as your first baseman. He has had a very nice spring training, launched a couple of home runs. Christian Pache has struggled to find a solid place in the majors. He was the number one pick or number one prospect of the Atlanta Braves that they got in the Matt Olson deal. He probably takes over your center field position for Starling Marte, at least until Laureano is back from his suspension, or until Laureano is traded. Maybe he takes that role back. If you're looking for bright spots on this team, it's still going to be in that starting staff. Brent Honeywell is probably the name that's going to stick there the longest. Cole Irvin as well. But the names that are still to be moved out, Frankie Montas and Sean Manaea, both figured to be gone by the end of the season. They both could be traded well before the deadline to kind of save on the cash. Maybe they hold on to them around the deadline to get a little bit bigger return, to see how far teams are willing to go to try to win a title this year, and see if they can really drum up the price for both of those. Manaea the lefty, Montas the righty. Closer is going to be Lou Trevino. He's been there for a number of years now. He's not going to be bringing back any big pieces if they do end up trading him. But the Athletics are trying to tear it down to the studs, and they've done pretty much that already. Most of their roster is going to be former AAA players last year. We'll see if another or a couple of failed major leaguers like Billy McKinney find a place and stick. Tony Kemp is going to lead off at second base for the A's this year. That tells you all about where the A's are going. Tony Kemp was a secondary piece, thought as a speedster for the Houston Astros. Never really got any at-bats with the Houston Astros, though. And so if he's your leadoff hitter and your number 3-hole hitter is your catcher, Sean Murphy, while a very good catcher and a good player all around, it's not going to be enough to win games. We're looking at a team that would struggle to win 60 games in any season with the current roster, and they still have to trade off other pieces. We'll see if they have enough left of all that young talent to get out of it to get above that 60 win threshold. Let us know in the comment section what you think of the A's yet again getting rid of all their good players, much like years ago when they sent Josh Donaldson to the Toronto Blue Jays. They send Matt Chapman this year to the Toronto Blue Jays, and they send Matt Olson to the Atlanta Braves to replace Freddie Freeman. Next on the list is going to be the Seattle Mariners. Now, I am very high on the Seattle Mariners this year. The acquisitions they have made, I expect to vastly improve this team. Adam Frazier is more of a contact player. They brought him in to play second base. Jesse Winker figures to be one of their 3-4 hitters, takes over that left field position. Do I believe he's the best left fielder in the game like the Shredder? No. And I think because of all the injuries and pandemic, the Shredder can't really be relied on the last 2 years anyway. But for our purposes, Jesse Winker, he's going to be a very productive player for them. Mitch Haniger is going to be very good as well. Another year of Jared Kelenic in center should do very well for the Mariners. The one question I have for their outfield is where are they going to find playing time for all these players? Kyle Long is coming off of injury. Do they move him to a corner outfield spot to keep his health? Eugenio Suarez is coming off of another down year for the Cincinnati Reds. He was the price that the Mariners had to pay in order to get a guy like Jesse Winker. They still have Abraham Toro and Luis Torrens possibly playing for that DH spot. Tom Murphy is still your catcher. Shortstop, they had looked at a number of different shortstop upgrades this offseason, namely Carlos Correa, Trevor Story, and Javi Baez. All three of them ended up saying no to the Mariners. They also looked for first base additions in Freddie Freeman. They checked in on the price of Matt Olson. And Jerry DiPoto, he's willing to make pretty much any deal. But it seems like the trades that he has made, he's very happy with right now. And he wants to stick with this roster at least to start the season. They did bring in Robbie Ray from the pitching side. They still have Marco Gonzalez. And then a bunch of young talent there after that. Chris Flexen, Logan Gilbert, and Matt Brash are all going to be in the starting rotation this year. Closer spot is still up for grabs. Ken Giles and Paul Sewald is there. We'll see who ends up winning the job in spring training. But for me, they have a lot of top prospects to come. We'll see if they end up going after a shortstop at the deadline. There's going to be a number of teams that are still going to be in the running this year for playoff contention due to the fact of the extra wildcard spot being added to both leagues. We'll see if that makes teams a little bit more willing to go out and acquire a piece. The Mariners haven't made the playoffs in a number of years now. It seems 20 years now, I think, since they won 101 games. The Seattle Mariners with Ichiro Suzuki, Ibanez, Edgar Martinez, that team. It's been a very long time for the Mariners since they've had any type of real success, and now seems to be the time where they could finally have it. They have an ace in Robbie Ray to lead their staff. Young talent after that. We'll see if they supplement that with maybe a Frankie Montas or a Sean Manaea. Maybe they call up the Cincinnati Reds again since they just made a trade. They're very familiar with each other's rosters at this point. Maybe they look to the Cincinnati Reds and go after Luis Castillo. The price could be very high for him, but they have the prospects that could do it. They have 4 prospects, I believe, in the top 20, 2 of them in the top 10 outfield prospects. The Reds are looking for a full rebuild. They don't have much talent in the outfield right now. They're trying to offload some more salary. Maybe they take on the contract of a Mike Moustakas, make him play a little bit of a reserve bench role and just eat the contract in order to get a guy like Luis Castillo. It remains to be seen what ends up happening with the Mariners, but I am very high on what the prospects for the Mariners this season, both because of their young prospects they have coming to acquire or to be able to acquire talent that they need as the season progresses and the moves they've already made. Their young talent is finally coming into the fold and succeeding Abraham Toro since the trade from the Houston Astros last year. He's done nothing but hit the ball or hit home runs since he came to the Mariners. Mitch Haniger has been their best player over the past few years. I expect nothing but more of that to continue. Jesse Winker, I expect him to be an all-star level left fielder. Ty France is there at first base. But again, the main piece I'm looking at is an on-base guy in Adam Frazier. They've had no trouble hitting the long ball the last few years, which is something to say in Seattle. But for me, Adam Frazier and the ability for this lineup to now be a complete lineup really moves this team forward into a possible playoff spot. Let us know in the comment section what you think if you're a Seattle Mariners fan. Where do you think this team is going to go in the next few years? Do you see them contending for a playoff spot every single year? Do you believe in that young talent coming? Julio Rodriguez is their top prospect in the minors in their outfield. They also acquired Trammell from the Padres earlier this past season. The lockout, of course, will affect all of these young guys differently. We'll see if they rebound from a tough offseason. Maybe the short, or maybe because they're younger, they'll be able to get into the swing of things a little bit quicker than some of the older guys who are used to more of a routine. When you're a minor leaguer, you're on a bus going from city to city to city playing games. You don't know if you're going to be in the lineup one day or the next. You're doing development stuff one day, playing the next, working on another element of your game the next day. Maybe those younger players will be a little bit more able to adapt to those situations. But for my money, the Mariners should be very good. The one team that I haven't discussed yet is the Texas Rangers. Now, just being forthcoming and letting you know where my hat is. I am a Rangers fan. I do believe that the additions of Seager and Semien will help the franchise, but I need y'all to know that I am a Rangers fan before we get into this, and take it for what it's worth. Mitch Garver should help their catching situation as well. Mitch Garver last year did suffer some injuries, and so the reason why he was available for such a low price, in my opinion, was because of those injuries. Normally a 257, 260 hitter sometimes can hit close to 280, 300 if he's got more playing time. If he can stay healthy, we could see a return of that Mitch Garver, the one who was hitting long balls 2 years ago for the Minnesota Twins. Corey Seager, longtime Los Angeles Dodger. The connections with the Dodgers and between the Rangers and the Dodgers is apparent. Chris Woodward, the manager, Chris Young, and now as the GM, apparently has a very close bond with a lot of players around the league, and he was able to convince 2 of the top 5 free agent shortstops to join the Rangers. The Rangers, who lost 102 games last year. I didn't stutter. They lost 102 games last year. Do I expect them to win a playoff spot? No. Do I expect them to be in it in September? Absolutely. And that's what Rangers fans haven't been able to say for a number of years now. Their team has been trying to get things going with young talent, 1 year stopgap type players, and it just hasn't gotten it done. They finally committed to a full rebuild about 2 years ago. They've got a good young players coming now: Jack Leiter, Cole Winn, Josh Young. Those are going to be some of the fruits of the team coming up through the minors. But right now, they wanted to invest in the team, make it a little bit better. So when those players were there, they had somebody to look up to, a model for them to follow. Corey Seager and Marcus Semien are nothing but great players, great examples for young players to follow, and that should bode well for a team that had Adolis Garcia last year, who finished 4th in the Rookie of the Year voting. They'll have another year of Nathaniel Lowe. Even though they tried to improve that first base position, they weren't willing to give up any of those blue chip prospects in order to get a player like Matt Olson. And after you saw the package that Atlanta sent for Matt Olson, you can't really blame them. The whole point of the rebuild that they were doing was to rebuild their farm system, and if they had done as much as the Braves did there, as far as how much they sent out, the Rangers' whole rebuilding process would have been put into one player, and they are not one player away. That's why they signed they traded for Mitch Garver. They signed John Gray, and even that I don't believe has them in a playoff spot next year. Maybe if they had signed another starter, maybe if they've got an outfield bat, maybe if they've gone after Suzuki, the Korean Japanese product anyway. Maybe if they had done that and solidified their outfield, maybe you could consider that. There is also the piece of Michael Conforto still out there on the market. He is probably going to take a 1-year deal after having a horrible season last year for the Mets. He needs a good platform year. He's still young enough to where he should receive a very nice contract. That qualifying offer, though, did hurt him, but he is the last free agent available. The Rangers, after signing Semien and Seager, lost their 2nd and 3rd round picks in the draft anyway. So we'll see what type of price or how high the Rangers are willing to go, even though they only have to give up a 4th round pick if they signed Michael Conforto. Moving on to the rest of the roster, they signed a whole bunch of smaller pieces as well. Matt Carpenter, Brad Miller, Cole Calhoun, all figured to be useful utility players for the Rangers. From a rotation side of things, they did bring in Garrett Richards and Martin Perez. They have a lot of familiarity with Perez. He was a former top prospect for the team, played for them for a number of years until they ended up cutting him and he moved on to Minnesota and Boston. He did perform very well. He was the best starter for the Red Sox at the beginning of the season. However, he wasn't able to keep it going and ended up out of the rotation and out of use for the Red Sox as they went down the stretch. John Gray takes over as ace of the staff. Young starters Dane Dunning, Taylor Hearn, and Spencer Howard round out the rotation. Spencer Howard got beat up last year. We'll see if he figured some things out. So far in spring training, good results, but again, take everything with a grain of salt since it's spring training. For example, Corey Seager's hitting 400 and Marcus Semien is hitting under 100. I don't expect any of those numbers to be anything close to what the regular season numbers will hold. But if you're a Rangers fan, a lot of youth is already on the big league roster with even more talent, bigger talent to come. And so we'll see what ends up happening. From a bullpen perspective, a lot of their bullpen pieces were injured last year. Jose Leclerc Clerk missed most of the year. He was their closer penciled in last year. If he's able to recover from injury, he may take over that closer role by midseason. But for right now, I expect Joe Barlow to still remain that closer. He was very effective last year in that role. He wasn't a traditional closer. He did pitch to contact. Closers by trade usually go after the strikeout. Barlow is not that guy, but they weren't able to score many runs off of him. Spring training has been a little bit rough, but as we've mentioned in other videos, bullpens are cyclical. One year they're really good, another year they're really bad. We'll see what ends up holding out for the Rangers. They had one of the worst bullpens in all of baseball. Barlow was one of the only bright spots on the team in the bullpen last year, so we'll see what ends up happening. Josh Young did have a torn labrum earlier this offseason, so if you were looking forward to him starting as your third baseman to start the season, sorry, it's just not going to happen. In fact, I fully expect him to miss the entire season, even though he could be healthy by September. The service time that they would save by allowing him to be pushed to another year would certainly be more beneficial to the Rangers at this point. The injury does hurt their chances for playoff contention this year, but next year they'll have a rookie in Josh Young, possibly a Rookie of the Year candidate in Josh Young. Jack Leiter figures to be in the rotation by then. Cole Winn probably makes the rotation around the trade deadline as well. We'll see where this team ends up around June, July. Let us know in the comment section what you think of the addition of Marcus Semien, Corey Seager, John Gray in the comments, and and also the loss of loss out on pieces like Clayton Kershaw, who decided to go back to the Dodgers, possibly getting Michael Conforto in free agency still. Let us know if you think that's enough of a boost to their outfield in order to justify the contract, the loss of another pick, and maybe even get them into playoff contention. Now, as far as the division itself, let's kind of run down the list. We have the Mariners, Angels, Athletics, Astros, and Rangers. All 5 teams have had some type of improvement with the exception of the A's. The A's I expect to finish in the cellar this year. I don't expect them to win 60 games. All the other teams are going to just beat up on them. They're going to lose most every series they're going to play. Sorry if you're an A's fan, it's just the way it's going to go this year. You're going to trade away more of your pieces this year. You're just going to completely bottom out, and it's going to be rough for about another year or two until those young pieces arrive and the stadium is built for you. If a stadium isn't built for you, all this is going to happen all over again in about 5 years. So buckle up, pray for a stadium, and I really hope you get one because it'd be nice to see the A's fans be able to cheer for somebody for more than 5 years. As far as the 4th place finisher, for me, that's going to be the Los Angeles Angels. They didn't address the pitching staff enough, in my estimation. The starting lineup, while it's very good, I do believe that there are some holes in there where you can exploit them as far as looking at, for instance, a Shohei Ohtani, but he's in the lineup most of the time, but he has had his issues with injury. Mike Trout also has starting to have issues with injury. So your best performers on the team aren't going to be there for 162. Rendon did not perform very well last year. Walsh did very well. They just signed Max Stassi to a contract extension. Marsh performed well as well. Joe Adell struggled to find some footing in the big leagues, started to perform a little bit better down the stretch. David Fletcher is a very good 9 hitter for you, but he's not going to hit for power. So I see how this lineup could be pitched to. And if the pitching isn't there for the Angels, it's not going to be enough to be able to compete for a playoff spot. I don't expect them to win even 75 games. We're looking probably low 70s, high 69, somewhere in there. But I don't expect them to compete for a playoff spot. The 3 teams left, Astros, Mariners, and Rangers. For me, even though I'm a Rangers fan, the Rangers still haven't done enough to make the postseason. They needed to add another pitcher and another bat. They didn't do either one. It seems like they want to keep their powder dry another year, let the team develop a little bit more, sort out these young pieces, the Nick Solaks, Andy Ibanez of the world, but they haven't done enough to be able to push them into playoff contention. Leadership on the team should be much better with the addition of Seager and Semien and Gray. So I am looking forward to see the effects of that on a pitching staff and on a lineup. Those young hitters in the lineup, will they be able to take more professional at-bats, or they can continue to strike out like the clip that they have over the past couple of years? Second place finisher for me is the Seattle Mariners, and I have them making the postseason. Congratulations, Mariners fan. Your playoff drought is finally over. Now, the Mariners, they do have a lot of top prospects available, which is the main reason why I believe they'll make a great playoff push, be able to go after one of those top starting pitchers on the market: Tyler Mahle, Luis Castillo, Frankie Montas, and Sean Manaea. We'll see if there's any other starters that end up being on the market. From a lineup perspective, They have a lot of prospects in the minors right now that could come up and help them at any time. They are very deep in the outfield, which is kind of surprising seeing them going after Jesse Winker. But getting an all-star level player for the cost that they gave up, you kind of can't complain. Great trade for them. If Eugenio Suarez can turn into anything like a productive hitter like he was their first few years he was in Cincinnati, that's just a steal of a trade for the Mariners. Jerry Dipoto, Trader Jerry, has just done great again. But for me, they're going to be the second place finisher. The Robbie Ray addition pushes them over the top and gets them some solid starting pitching. But they're going to need a little bit more, and I expect them to get some at the deadline. However, the best in this division is still the Houston Astros, even with the losses they've taken of Corey Seager, of Carlos Correa and George Springer over the last couple of years. George Springer, to me, along with Carlos Correa, was the heartbeat of that team. We'll see what they do now. Altuve is still there. Bregman and Tucker, maybe they take over as the next core for the Houston Astros. This lineup is starting to get a little bit thinner at the back end. The rotation has a lot of young pieces in it, but I fully expect them to perform well. They were acquitted well in the playoffs last year. Even though they didn't win the World Series, they still performed very well, and I expect that success to translate. They no longer have a Zach Greinke to kind of lean on as well. Lance McCullers is injured to start the year, so we'll see if they can get anything out of him as the season progresses. If you're a Houston Astros fan, congratulations. You've had a great run. I fully expect this to continue this year, but the next 2-3 years, you're looking at an up-and-coming Mariners team with lots of prospects and talent on the way. The Rangers are adding pieces like Corey Seager, Marcus Semien that are going to be there for a number of years, and young talent on the way as well. Jack Leiter, Cole Winn, Josh Young. And then looking at the LA Angels, they always have Shohei Ohtani, the best pitcher, possibly the best hitter in the majors. Best hitter to me still, though, is Nick Castellanos over the past couple of years. But Ohtani is right up there. If you're looking at this division, it still goes through the Astros, but let us know in the comment section what you think of how this division is going to end up. Do you think the Rangers have actually done enough? I don't really believe they have. The Mariners have done really well. I expect them to finish second in this division, maybe even take the division next year, but the Astros are still the class of this division. Thank you again for joining us here at The Upside. We appreciate every single one of you who have subscribed. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. And thank you again for joining our community. And welcome to The Upside.